Here's the truth. Most coaches are wildly unproductive with their time. And if you can't get the most out of your time, if you can't optimize your productivity, you have no chance. I mean, you're never going to be able to build the business that you want. You're not going to be able to make the money that you want. You're never going to be able to create the foundation to get you out of a job or create the impact that you want in the world. So what I'm going to do in this video is take you inside one of our paid programs called the Foundations of Marketing for Coaches. It's a $2,500 ticket. And in this module, I'm going to teach you how to go from the productivity that you have now to 4 times the results, to 15 times the results, to 50 times the results. I mean, just imagine what your life would be like, what your business would be like if you could exponentially increase the output that you're getting on your time. Imagine how much further ahead you would be from where you are now and or from what so many other people are producing in the coaching space. You're gonna love this. Enjoy. All right, welcome to module 18, the Love Boat module, apparently. So in this module, we are gonna do a little bit of a mindset checkup, and then we're gonna get into webinars. I've got a whole process laid out for you that hopefully will be valuable to you. So let's start with mindset. I wanna share with you a concept that I learned a while back, and it's a common concept that we talk about a lot, but I want to share with you a distinction and an extension of it. So what I've learned is that, especially in this industry, when we're creating products and we are the product, and we want to build a business or just expand, even if you want to simply be a coach hiring or getting hired by clients, and you want to expand that, then you got to focus on what works. I mean, it's just that simple, right? Focus on the things that are bringing the results to you. And so we've got this principle called the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule. It's probably more commonly known as. And success in this industry requires expanding on the 20% that produces the majority of the results. So the old Pareto principle says 20% of your efforts will give you 80% of your results. And that applies to so many different areas of life. Now, it doesn't matter that the exact numbers are measured, the percentage is measured. Don't worry about that as much as the concept. And so in this industry, in order to do that, well, in any industry, in order to do that, you have to track. And you have to track a lot of efforts. So one of the stories that I shared a while back is from Teresa in this group. And she and I were on the phone. She told me that she had done, I believe, 20 Facebook Lives in a row. And she didn't know what to continue doing going forward, or if they would continue working or what have you. And I think she asked me something like, what should I name them, or what content? And I just said, well, let's look at the results. What are the most popular videos in terms of views? The most popular videos, there's roughly a handful of them. They were controversial in nature. The titles were, and the content was. So it was really easy to take a look at, well, these, let's just say it was 5 videos. I don't know that it was, but these 5 videos were controversially titled, and there was controversial content in there, and you got the most amount of views and the most amount of engagement. And then these weren't. So let's dive into these 5, and let's do your next set of videos with more controversial topics. Maybe even expand on some of these topics because they've been proven to succeed. So let's expand on what's already worked and go deeper. That's how people that do advertising, especially on Facebook and some of the things that I'm familiar with, that's how they do their ads. They put out a bunch of different ads, and then they see which ones are working better than the others, drop the ones that are not working as well, and then expand all their efforts inside of this tier that's outperforming all the rest. And then they just keep doing the same thing. What's outperforming this level of advertisements? And then they'll focus on the few that's outperforming those, and then dive into those. And so you're constantly expanding inside what's working. Now, the only way you can do that is to have tracking And the only way you can track is to have data, is to have efforts. So that's one of the reasons why we got to do a lot of videos, and we got to put out content, and we got to put out blog articles, and we got to do a lot of work just to get data. So one of the things that we talked about earlier in the program is to not perfect the irrelevant. And remember, the things that you're focusing on in the beginning of a process, whether it's the beginning of your business, the beginning of a particular like new product in your business, or doing an online course, or whatever a new chapter is, in the beginning, you know, there's a concept in general business called minimum viable product. How can you just get something out into the market that's viable at minimum, and then see if it works or not, and get feedback from everybody out in the market that doesn't like it, you know? So Microsoft or Apple will release their new programs and products and operating systems, and then they hear from the market where it's all screwed up, and then they'll adjust, you know, and then 10.14.1 becomes 10.14.2 and so forth. So this concept is get something out there, get data, and then adjust. In this industry, what too many people are doing is trying to perfect the very first thing that they put out. Or even if it's not perfect that you're trying to go for, there's too much energy put on the early efforts, when a lot of times the early efforts is simply to get something in motion so that we can get some tracking going and then adjust along the way. So it's a concept that we've talked about in many different angles, and it's a concept that you've got to continually apply, because we're just doing this cycle of creating and perfecting, or optimizing, not perfecting, but optimizing and tracking and measuring and adjusting. That's what's required to build a solid system of any kind, and certainly a solid business. We got to get data. We got to get effort. So I want to share with you a couple extensions of the Pareto principle that I learned many years ago. So the idea is 20% of your efforts yields 80% of your results. And what that means is there are certain activities that are more valuable than other activities. And then the idea is, if you were to spend more time on those 20% activities, then you would increase your results. Again, focus on what's working, do more of what's working and less of what's not working. And all the other things that aren't working as well, you either stop doing them completely, or you delegate those, or find a way to optimize them better. So you're constantly wanting to put more of your time and energy into the things that are working best. Now, if you take Pareto's principle and you do it again on itself, meaning and I'm going to show you some diagrams here in a moment. So I'm going to kind of share this maybe 2 or 3 different ways. But if you take Pareto's principle and you say, these are the 20% results, and then you only focus on the 20%, and then apply Pareto's principle to that again, 20% of those 20% is 4%. So now we're taking the same thing, but then just applying the principle onto itself inside the 20% activities. Now, I don't remember how what I'm showing you here was measured, and it doesn't matter that you concern yourself with the precise mathematical truths of these percentages. I want you to focus on the concept. Regardless of the percentages and regardless of whether you can follow along with this mathematically or not, I want you to really focus on the concept. That's what's at play here. And if you're somewhat mathematically inclined, like I am, some of these numbers are actually really cool, and it will help you remember some of them. So according to what I heard and learned, if you do that again, then the 4% of your activities actually still produce over 60% of your results. Meaning that these, what I call the 4% activities, you even get more bang for your buck. And I'll show you again a diagram how this plays out if we expand it out. And then if you do the same thing, you take the 4%, and then do Pareto's principle again. 4% of 4% is 0.8, but we're going to round it up to 1%. 1% of your efforts will still yield over 50% of your results. Now, of course, these are going to fluctuate in industry. They're going to fluctuate in types of business. They're going to fluctuate. But the concept is what I really want you to get. So let me show you, let me explain this conceptually, and then I'll show you a diagram. So if you were to take your 20% activities and you were to do them all the time. Now, in other words, you're not doing these only 1/5 of the time. You're doing them all the time. So you identify and then you go, I'm going to spend my entire day only doing these activities. Well, then you would increase your results 4 times. And I'll show you diagrammatically why in a second. If you were to do only your 4% activities all the time, you would increase your results 15 times. And if you were to do your 1% activities all the time, you would increase your results 50 times. So the concept here that I really want you to get, not the math, if it's making your brain want to explode, is that you focus on what works and then do it more, and you exponentially increase your output. That's basically what it is. And in my experience, especially with creativity, which we are all in the business of here, it's not linear like that. It's actually exponential. So in other words, if you were to spend an hour working on, let's say you wanted to do a speech, you were to spend an hour working on your speech, and then you came back tomorrow and spent another hour working on a speech, and then the next day, another hour working on your speech. And let's say you did 1 hour, 10 days in a row, you would have cumulatively 10 hours worked. But if you were to spend 1 day and just dive in 10 straight hours, you would get exponentially more output than 1 hour over the course of 10 days, because you would just keep digging and your ideas would continue flowing and they would continue expanding, and you wouldn't be putting an end to this hour and then going to bed and going to sleep and having all the thoughts that you have in between the sessions and then trying to re-engage yourself in that time period, and you wouldn't be on for an hour. It's kind of like riding a bunch of horses at once. You try to ride a bunch of horses at once, you got to dismount one and then go to the next and then mount the other one. And then ride it for however long you're going to ride it, and then you got to dismount it. It's this process of dismounting and then mounting the different tasks that we're messing with. That costs a lot of time. It costs a lot of energy. It costs a lot of brilliance. So it's in the process of shutting down and then re-engaging, right? It's like the landing and then the takeoff of an airplane. That's why one of the things I say is keep your plane in the air for this idea here. So when you go deeper and you stay focused, when creativity is involved, you exponentially increase the output. That's the key here. And that's why it can be really powerful for most people to block your time. Instead of doing maybe a little bit every day that's administrative, and then a little bit every day that's creative, and then a little bit every day that is management related. Instead of doing that, what a lot of people find is that, especially with the creative stuff, they'll spend half of a day or maybe an entire day just doing creative activities. And then maybe 4 hours just doing administrative stuff and 4 hours just doing this other stuff. And of course, as your company expands, if you want to bring on team members and so forth, then that starts to get dispersed with the various people, the various different, the roles on the team. But the idea is, let's focus on what works and then let's expand. So let me show you a diagram here. And my intention is not to teach you this mathematically, but I want to give it to you in a way that will help you remember how important this concept is. So the idea of Pareto principle is that in the 20% of your activities here in the yellow box, you're going to get 80% of your results. Now, if you were to say, I'm not doing anything else other than these 20% activities, then you would be basically multiplying it by 5. Instead of just doing it 1/5 of the time, you're doing it all of the time, 100% of the time. And so now you can see if it works out mathematically, which of course it won't in real life, linearly like this. But now you're taking the 80% of your results and you're multiplying it by 5. That's why they say it's a 400% increase. It's a 4 times increase of, it's a 4 times increase or 400% of your output. So that's visually how this is working. And then the other 2 extensions, if we were to take the 80% and put the same filter, now this, I didn't do this to scale just because of spacing. But instead of the 80%, each one of these are 60% of your results, which means each one of these are 4% of your time. That's why over here on the left side, there are 25 of these blocks, 25 of these rectangles, and each one of them represents 60% of your output, right? Still a pretty good majority of your output. So if there are 25 of those and each one is 60%, then we can multiply those 2 together and we get a 1,500%, 15 times increase. If the math is freaking you out, don't worry about it. The bottom line is identify what works and do more of it. And it's going to increase your output exponentially. And then if we were going to do the same thing and each one of these was 1% of what you do, which creates 50% of your output. Now there's 100 of those. So if you were to get this crystal clear and go, my genius is just doing this, and you were to do nothing but that, the output would be tremendous. Now, you're not going to be able to do that on your own. There are plenty of components of a business that need to happen. So you can't be on your own as a solopreneur and go, you know what, I'm only going to do videos and just, increase my output. Well, if there's not anybody editing and uploading videos and taking customer service calls, then all the other things are going to fall down. So I want you to understand this is something to work into. This isn't just a simple switch for you to make, but if you understand how powerful this concept is, then as you're going about your day-to-day business, you can be more focused on the things that are actually producing more input. Now, you might think that this only applies to people who have big companies or they've got team members and employees and contractors. I think it probably applies more to those of you that are doing it part-time. Because if you're doing it part-time, if you only have a certain number of hours to work because you have a job, because you have a family, you have all these other responsibilities, if you only have a certain amount of time, then you want that time to be the most effective as possible. So if you were to take a look at myself or anybody else that you're following or anybody else you have access to, and you were to take a look at all the different things that they do, but you don't have the amount of time that they have, then what you would want to do is identify the activities, because you're low on time, that are going to give you the biggest return for your time investment. So I think this actually applies to part-time people even more so than full-time people if you're wanting to get the most out of the time that you're putting into your business. Yeah, Michelle says it allows for more intentional and deliberate choices. Completely true. All right, now if you like this video, you're gonna really love that one where I break down what one of those 1% activities should be. Longer calls equals less clients. The longer you stay on the phone with somebody and the more issues you help them out with, the less likely they are to hire you.